And it's Thursday morning, and it means it's time for our resident lawyer, Despina Priala, from boutique law firm Priala Legal in Runaway Bay, with us here once again to offer her legal expertise. She provides some general advice on the latest hot topics, which come thick and fast now. Of course, having experience spanning more than 25 years in areas such as property and commercial law, she also prepares wills as part of estate planning and litigation, and a whole stack more. She's with us this morning. Morning to you, Despina.
Good morning, Wayne. Good morning, Brooke.
Good morning, Despina. So this is, I love this segment because you have some funny stories. We know that obviously being a property and commercial lawyer for so long, you have had some strange and stressful experiences with your clients, and one recently that is quite timely, a missing dishwasher. Small things can turn into big things, and you had to deal with this issue. So what happened?
Yeah, so as you say, it's a little bit funny in some respects, although on the day of settlement,
On the day it's not.
Anything but, yeah.
That's right. We're trying to deal with the problem
Yeah.
that comes to us as a surprise. So it sometimes happens in practice and when people are buying and selling properties. And of course, people have a right to inspect the home prior to settlement, and that gives them the opportunity to make sure that the house presents itself in the same way that it did prior to them going under contract. That's very important, and that's a right under the contract. So, and we've had some unusual situations where people go and inspect, and lo and behold, things are missing. And recently we had a case where the dishwasher was removed. So that's an unusual one, and we had to deal with that. And we've had other cases in the past, for example, bike racks that are installed in garages have been removed. So there's interesting examples over the years. It was timely for me to bring it up on the show because it's all about fixtures versus chattels. And we've had some interesting discussions and arguments over the years for clients about what is a fixture and what is a chattel. And they are two very different and distinct things. And the courts over the years have also determined that as well. So when you sign a contract, there's an ability in your contract to list included chattels. And there's an ability for the seller to actually list any excluded fixtures. So fixtures that the seller will take with them or excluded from the sale. And at its very basic level, the difference between a chattel and a fixture is basically this, that a chattel is something that can be easily removed, whereas a fixture is not. A fixture is generally something that's securely affixed to the land.
Sure, and that's why a dishwasher is so funny, because I guess there's that space there for it. It's sitting there on realestate.com or whatever it is. It's there when you view it, and then all of a sudden it's gone.
Well, you wouldn't think it'd be a problem because generally dishwashers are
Connected.
not taken.
Yeah.
They don't run
That's
away.
right.
Yeah.
And when this happened, I went to the contract, and of course in the contract there was nothing listed under included chattels. So you always, when there's a dispute or a problem, you always go to the contract first to see what does the contract say, putting aside the fact that you generally know in the back of your mind dishwashers are probably considered fixtures and not chattels. So when I went to the contract, there was nothing listed there. So my advice to people out there, because it's such sometimes it's a grey area between what's a fixture and what's a chattel, is that rather than have problems at settlement, you need to really list everything in the contract. And I mean everything in included chattels. So things that you would think, oh, that's included in the sale. I'm sure they're not going to take the blinds, the carpets, the fans, the dishwasher, the microwave. Make sure that they're all listed. Because the way I see things is to avoid doubt, put everything in there, right? Everything that you go and inspect, put all of those things in there. Other examples like garden sheds. Now, garden sheds are an interesting one because garden sheds are usually affixed to the ground or sometimes affixed on a concrete slab.
Yeah.
So those items should be considered fixtures. But what if it isn't? What if it's just a portable garden shed? So another example, pool cleaning equipment. Yeah, I know.
Hang on, have you heard someone take a whole garden shed?
Well,
Have you seen that?
there are garden sheds and garden sheds. I mean, someone called it a garden shed maybe to advertise, but what if it's not really a proper garden shed? What if it's something else? So what I'm saying is anything that you go through and you can see, oh yes, well that's included with the house because it's there, and the seller refers to it, put it in the contract. A pool cleaning equipment is also an interesting one because when you think of pool cleaning equipment, you've got hoses, vacuums,
Yep.
you've got portable items, but then you've got the things that are affixed to the wall, near
like
the
a filter
pool
or
the
itself.
pump,
something.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yep.
pump.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes the equipment's very expensive. So there are interesting examples. So other examples such as TVs, such as wheelie bins, pot plants. So those things should be chattels by rights. And then you talk about fixtures and examples such as, water tanks, solar panels. What about a basketball hoop that's attached to the garage wall? You see, that's a really good example, and that should be a fixture because it's affixed to the wall, you see.
Yeah, okay.
So what I'm saying is sometimes there's a grey area, such as dishwashers can be a grey area, and I'll explain why in a minute. Curtain rods, blinds. What about a barbecue? What about gas bottles? So there's a grey area as well as to whether something's a fixture or a chattel. And that's why I always say, look, to avoid all confusion or any problems, list it in the contract when you sign it. Okay, because if you go back to the dishwasher example, there has been a case over the years called Farley and Hawkins, and it's a well-known case. And in that case, the courts did say that, look, a dishwasher is a fixture, but in that case, they did talk about, though, specific things in this property about how the dishwasher was actually affixed to the land, how it appeared in the kitchen. It was quite interesting. So they talked about how the kitchen was specifically constructed to incorporate a section for a dishwasher that was enclosed in a cupboard, as opposed to, they mentioned, a dishwasher that was freestanding on its own somewhere in a corner, or maybe on wheels, which is a bit unusual, but they did distinguish it. Yeah, so not always dishwashers are just an automatic, yes, it's a fixture. It does depend. And that's why I say, make sure you put that dishwasher in your included chattels.
Is there a specific list, for example, or is there some way of determining that apart from? I mean, obviously you talked about writing it down. Could two different parties see something differently?
100%. And this is why the advice is that when you make an offer to buy a property as a buyer, you need to list in the included chattel section, because there's a specific section for it in the REIQ contract and in the ADL contract. You list the included chattels. Now, when you present that offer to the seller's going to see that. So the seller will say, okay, I agree, or I don't agree. And if he agrees, then he signs the contract, or she signs the contract. And then they've actually agreed then and there what are the included chattels. The problem that arises, which we've had some recent examples of, is where we have contracts where there's nothing listed. So what you said before is exactly what happens in that scenario. The seller has thought that certain things were fixtures or chattels, and the buyer had a different interpretation. And then when there's a dispute, you go to the contract. And if the contract is silent about that, then you may have as you say, a small problem turn into a big problem on the day of settlement. And I have to emphasize it a bit, because when you go to put an offer on a property, people don't necessarily think of the included chattels. 9 times out of 10, when people come to me and they say, can you just check this contract before I present it to the seller, which I always recommend, then I check everything as part of that offer. And one of those is included chattels. Now, of course, other things that are important, such as the price, the deposit, when it's payable, is it subject to finance? Do you have other conditions that are important? When's the settlement date? All of those things are important. But 9 times out of 10, when I mention, oh, what about included chattels? Then the buyer says to me, oh, I didn't think about that. So it is something that's often, it's right. And they assume, and it's often something that they don't think about, and then they miss it in the contract. And it's our job to point those things out to clients. Things like shade sales, right? So that's another one. There are so many properties on the Gold Coast that have shade sales still that are incorporated. So what about those items? There are lots of examples I could give you. So the moral of the story,
write it down,
is to, write it in the contract, so then there is no room for ambiguity.
That is Despina Priala from boutique law firm Priala Legal. And coming up next, Queenslanders, is your pool area and smoke alarms up to standard? The requirements have changed under the new REIQ contracts, and Despina has all the details coming up next on Talking Law. You're listening to Radio 97.